Surely the Tory proposal to slap like 50p or a pound on a lager and Alco Pops is just a knee-jerk reaction to the problem and won't actually solve the problem of binge drinking of young people. It also makes the assumption that most binge drinkers are from the lower classes.
I don't understand the class reference, because I don't think Alco Pops have got anything particularly to do with what class you are, but they tend to be, I guess the Alco Pops are seen as being particularly attractive to young people who haven't learned to enjoy the taste of alcohol. So if you drink it and it tastes like lemonade and it gets you drunk, then there's an element there. Personally, I don't think the pricing of alcohol is the key determinant, and I wouldn't put the Tesco in the dock either for selling something cheaply. It is a cultural issue, but it could be that increasing tax in a targeted way on certain drinks while using the revenue derived from that to lower costs on lower alcohol drinks could play a part, along with a lot of other measures, in contributing to into reducing the problem. But I have some sympathy with your point of view.
Do you think things like MySpace, Facebook can be used in politics successfully?
Yeah, and I think actually you're going to get electorally punished if you don't soon. I mean, we've all got to get a lot smarter with it. I mean, I've got a Facebook page. I don't particularly use it strong. I don't promote it strongly for politics, but it sits there. I've got my website, which I hopefully is going to be improved again. My new version is absolutely rubbish at the moment, but I'm going to get that improved. I think working with single issue groups as well, if that's what people turns them on, then in a sense politics, I've got to align myself with that. People who care about the environment, I've got to do more to allow people who are interested in that to interact with me as their MP on that particular front. And if they think I'm doing a good job and see that they agree with it, then that will actually serve my party political purposes, if you like, but that by earning their support and trust.
A lot of people would argue that 18 may be an unfair voting age. What is your opinion on maybe lowering the voting age to incorporate more younger people, as you've said, to get them interested in politics, to actually give them the responsibility to vote for their representatives?
Well, my response to that would be, well, the big problem we've got at the moment is people 18 to 24 and even older aren't voting. So the idea that the great solution is to reduce it to 16 to even younger people who are even more likely to feel unqualified to vote. I don't see that as a big answer. I mean, it's an easy thing to say to a youth audience, oh yeah, you should all be given a say. But I mean, if the people who've got it already we're not managing to interact with in order to provide you with the wherewithal and the confidence or the sense of relevance to vote, then just seems to me I'm not really in favour of 16. As I say, I could be persuaded over time, but anyone who suggests that it's the solution to some problem, I find it pretty incredible, really.
In relation to environmental issues, when is the Conservative Party going to commit themselves to put pressure on big business to curb their carbon emissions, and when they don't, castigate them?
Well, I don't think castigating big business is the way to go. What we need is a cap on emissions, of which business then plays a part. The Conservative Party led the campaign to get a climate change bill, which the government finally caved in and is now agreeing to pass that. We will pass that with the unanimous support of all the three main political parties this year, and that will create obligations in law to reduce the emissions within this country, in which business plays a part. So I think once you set the cap and once you enforce it, then what we've got to ensure is that we don't do. There may be some what they call sectoral regulations on a particular areas of business, but fundamentally I think we need to have a cap on the emissions that go out from this country, and then allow people to basically buy the license to pollute, so to speak. And if you do that, then you'll be able to bring it under control. I'd like to see the government's been rather, and the EU has been rather tame in its sales, in its auctioning of these licenses. So the impact of the first emissions trading scheme in Europe was in fact to just hand permits to big polluting companies. So they got billions of pounds windfall, and they didn't actually reduce their emissions. So it was a disastrous failure environmentally. But we just pass the framework and order them to do it. No castigation required. We can love them and thank them for all they do for our economy at the same time.
If you don't mind me asking on a constituents level, do you have anything to say on the local area bus transport for school zones, which quite frankly is ridiculously overexpensive for something that that really should be a necessary free?
We've had for quite a number of years the 4th lowest education funding in the country, and we've moved up slightly. We're only the 8th lowest now, and the cost of transport for the East Riding of Yorkshire Council on that very low income base is very high. So I mean, basically the transport budget in Hull, as you might imagine, is bordering on nil. And I think a few years ago when our education budget was 140 million, 8 million of that was going on transport. I agree with you. I mean, we need to, if we're going to provide equity for people who live in rural areas, then we've got to allow people to access education. And I was at the East Riding College earlier today talking about the diplomas, where the government, a bit like its free bus pass, which it announced for the elderly people everywhere, but they haven't funded it properly. So there are going to be councils that are struggling to pay. But likewise, the new diplomas, there will be an entitlement in 2013 for people to be able to have access to these diplomas. But that means being able to get from school to another school where bits will be supplied to a college. Well, in Hull, that's not overly difficult. In the East Riding, it's enormously difficult because we have very weak transport links. And, you know, you look at the more deprived areas of my constituency, you look at Withensea, and, you know, there's so many challenges already. I mean, like going to FE, you get a dropout rate from Hull College because they, you know, you've got to get up damned early, you then got to go and get on an unreliable bus, and when it doesn't turn up, you have a problem, and then you've got to travel all the way into Hull. No wonder that people often drop out. Sorry, overly long answer. I agree with you. I don't know, I mean, you'll probably be heading off, but I'm probably not as aware of the exact figures and costs as I ought to be.
Going back to the question of Olympic funding, surely if MPs such as yourself hadn't voted to replace the Trident nuclear weapons at a cost of £26 billion to the taxpayer, we could afford the Olympics twice over?
Yeah, depending on what it costs. Yeah, but the defence of this country is the most fundamental responsibility of any government, and it was our view that Trident was worth replacing, and that we should retain our nuclear deterrent in a dangerous and unstable world.
Are you saying then it's morally acceptable that in the world we live in today to have weapons that can cause that kind of destruction and so on? Are you saying that it's right for a country to be able to deal that kind of power out?
I'm saying that I think it's the right thing for us to do. It's far from ideal. Do we want to have weapons like that? If we could disinvent the science, would we? I mean, you know, these are all hypotheticals, aren't they? In a world where people do have such weapons, where states, unstable and dangerous states, are seeking to get them, I'm not convinced that tying your hands behind your back and saying, hit me, is a very good idea. And at least up to now, the mutual deterrence with the Soviet Union, although it got pretty dicey around the Bay of Pigs, fortunately we didn't destroy the planet. I'd like to see us carry on with multilateral agreements that saw, you know, what we need is a world that consists of decent states, hopefully democratic states, who agree that holding these weapons is morally wrong and that we should eradicate them all and they should all be put in the dustbin. But while we don't have people like that, while in fact we have, you know, the risk of, you know, Pakistan is the most scary country in the world, in my opinion. You know, if extremists took over their nuclear arsenal, I put it back to you. Are you really suggesting to me it would be a good idea if nobody else had any?